There was an interesting article on YouTube, and it showed two news reports basically, one from 1983 and one from 2020. And the first article, which was on NBC News in America in 1983, said we had 7 to 10 years before climate catastrophe. This is 1983. The one in 2020 was Bernie Sanders, and he virtually word for word repeated exactly what the 1983 person had said. So this climate catastrophe stuff is not new. They've just been droning on about it now for decades. Almost half of a century they've been droning on about it. But we keep lapping it up, Nick.
We do. I think it was last year that the date, that little
Greta Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg. So when she first hit the scene, she said something like, we've got 7 years to save the world, or something like that. I think she said to the UN. That date was last year. Well, we didn't save the world, did we? We're fine.
Yeah. And Al Gore, he was given a Nobel Prize in 2007. And at the Nobel Prize speech in 2007, he predicted by 2014 the Arctic, which is the northernmost ice mass, would be ice-free. Yeah. Basically, all the ice will have melted by 2014. And this is what he said when he was receiving his Nobel Prize, presumably for services to climate change, I'm guessing, was it?
Something like that.
This year, the Arctic, so we're in 2024 now, 10 years after 2014, it had 26% more sea ice than in 2012.
Yeah.
So, so we're seeing all these stats, Nick, and I guess the question is, when are people going to see, as we're now seeing with Labour, when are people going to see that this is just all a nonsense?
When it gets worse, because it's not got worse yet. So do you remember when everyone went on about climate warming?
Yes.
We stopped using that term, climate warming.
Global warming. Global warming, yeah.
We stopped using that phrase about 2000.
Yeah.
Because NASA data showed that the world wasn't heating up anymore. So then they called it climate change. And then climate change. And it's like, well, nothing's changing. Right? Climate emergency. And the reason why it's an emergency is because you can't see it. That's what makes it an emergency. And they keep changing the phraseology because nothing ever changes.
Yeah.
Now, we all want to live in a pollution-free world. Of course we do. We need to look after the planet. Of course we do. We need not to destroy the oceans and cut down all the forests. Of course. But there's a way of managing the planet which we're doing better and better every single year. There's more forests in the world now than ever before.
Yeah.
And these are just ideologues. It doesn't matter what evidence you gave them. They know the end is nigh. There's always been people who've walked around with billboards saying the end is nigh.
Yeah.
And every religion has something like this. Armageddon, the end of days. There's a religious zeal about this, that the world's going to end and I'm going to be your saviour. I'm going to be Christ-like and I'm going to save the world. And these people have bought into their own narcissism and their own messiah complex.
I'd like to posit something different. I was just thinking as you were talking then that this is about leverage and power, but based on always an invisible enemy.
Faith.
Yeah, correct. And it's a really good point that. What is religion but faith in an invisible being? What was COVID? COVID was fear and chaos around an invisible enemy that they told us about. What is climate change? It is an invisible enemy that you can't see, Nick, but I'm telling you, this is coming.
Yeah.
Far-right thugs, they were an invisible enemy, weren't they? So it's this constant pushing of fear, an agenda of fear onto people based on something that nobody can see.
Because that's how you introduce tyranny.
Yeah.
Through fear and saying, I will protect you from this invisible whatever it is.
And if you think about it, the trans thing, that's invisible, isn't it? How do I know, looking into your head, that you think you're a woman? You're telling me, but I don't know, do I? Because it's invisible. There's no empirical evidence. Critical race theory. You're a racist because you're white, Nick. You're a racist. There's no evidence to show that.
Yeah.
It's an invisible thing that somebody's leveraging on to propel and promote fear, isn't it, basically? But I didn't actually think about it before. But you're right. When they started talking about climate change, you can't see it, by the way. It's invisible, but it's happening. You better be aware, basically.
There's no data.
No
I
data.
can't show you anything. Nothing's changed.
No.
But it's there.
Yeah.
A bit like the devil. That's what it is. It's the devil. It's a new version of the devil.
Yeah.
We can't prove it exists, but it's going to be bad for you
Yeah.
unless you believe in me and
Yeah.
I'm your saviour.
Yeah. The devil or God, isn't it? I mean, they're high priests, these people, aren't they? They're high priests of particular things,
Yes.
but there's no evidence. We have to believe them,
Yes.
basically. But I'd never really thought about it before. But yeah, all these things have one thing in common. They're invisible, basically. And they're just propelling fear onto us all the time. And COVID was that, wasn't it? Nobody could see COVID. You couldn't even see when people had COVID, could you? But they were telling us how bad it was all the time. But there was never any real evidence that.
I don't know anyone who died.
No, I don't think I do either. I don't think I do. I've heard of lots of people dying since. And I've met a lot of people who have had vaccine injuries. So I was mentioning those relatives of Anna's from Australia who came over last week, and I've got to be careful of his name here, but he was a golfer in Australia, loved golf, didn't want the COVID jab, but in Australia they were far more draconian than they are here. He had to have the jab to play golf, took the jab, knackered him.
Yeah.
His heart, basically. Within a couple of hours of having the COVID jab. So I know quite a lot of people who've got stories like that.
Yeah.
That is real. That is tangible. So Jordan Peterson, and you just mentioned this now, but he's now called climate science an appalling scam. Has made the point that CO2 is at its lowest level for like 4,000 years at the moment. And if it goes any lower CO2, the plants will start dying. As a result of the slight increase, the planet, and you made the point, is 20% greener now than it was in the year 2000. That can't be bad, can it?
No.
Having loads of plants out there absorbing CO2.
If you go to Spain, and you've been to Spain, you've seen the polytunnels
Yes.
growing all our fruit and veg.
Yes.
They pump CO2 into the polytunnels because it increases the yield of the plants.
Of course. Yeah.
CO2 is plant food.
Yeah. Yeah.
The more CO2 we have, I mean, you can get too much, in which case it's bad for all of us. But as Jordan Peterson says, it's a cycle. All these are cycles.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're at the bottom of a CO2 cycle.
Yeah.
It's going to get more because we're at a cycle.
Yeah.
And the more we have of CO2, the greener the world will become.
Whenever people start droning on about CO2 to me, and I was at a board meeting actually about a year ago, and the lady there was an obsessive, we need to keep our CO2 levels down. And I said to her, do you know what the percentage of CO2 is in the atmosphere? And she said, 5%, 10%? I said, no.
0.2.
It's 0.4%. So these people who have this zeal for these things don't actually know the data.
They don't know science. They've been scared into believing something.
Yeah, yeah. And I said to her at the end, it was interesting, I may have said this before when we've been talking, I said to her at the end, and I took her through a whole load of stats basically, because I do know quite a few stats around CO2 and climate change and things like that. And I was telling her what percentage the UK contributes to the, because human beings only contribute something like 5% to the overall thing, and the UK contributes something like
1%.
Yeah, 1% of that 5%. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, so 95% is generated by the planet from plants and everything else. The rest,
volcanoes are big.
One volcano can completely distort the amount of CO2. It probably gives off more than the UK in a year. And I talked her through all this stuff, and at the end I said, "This isn't going to change your mind, is it?" She said, "No, it's not."
No.
So, even though she didn't know any of the data, was quite shocked by what I told her. She was going to carry on with that insanity.
But you can understand why, and you can understand why because we're tribal creatures, and we're programmed to do as we're told by the tribal leader to keep us safe. So, if the tribal leader or your parents, who are tribal leaders in a much smaller tribe, tell you keep away from strange dogs, you don't go, well, no, because there's no evidence that dogs bite. You take it at face value, you build it into your psyche, keep away from strange dogs because you believe the people who've told you that. And that's what a lot of this is. They've been told by people they trust, meaning the government, scientists, it's the science.
Yeah.
We've heard all this before. And for them it's a win-win situation. There either is climate change, in which case I'm contributing to keeping it low and that will save me, or there is no climate change and I'm contributing to nothing and that won't harm me either.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah, I suppose it's like the idea, and I don't know who said it, it might have been Orson Welles or Gore Vidal. He said, I don't believe in God, but when I'm going to die, I'm going to pray to God, just in case.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause it's like, you know, if there is a God and I convert on my deathbed, then I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And if there isn't, it doesn't matter anyway. You know,
Exactly.
so it's kind of like, isn't it? The Washington Post, which is quite a left-wing paper, American newspaper, to try and prove a point, mapped out 500 million years of global temperatures to try and prove the points. And in fact, what they actually showed was, in the last 500 million years, the average temperature has been 36 degrees. In 2023, in the world, it was 14.98 degrees. So all they ended up showing was actually it's quite cold at the moment, and I think we're actually on the cusp, either on the cusp of an ice age finishing or an ice age beginning at the moment, rather than
We're still coming out of an ice age.
yeah. It's actually getting colder at the moment. It's been getting colder for the last 400 million years.
No.
There's a little blip. I think I don't know if I sent you the graph. So even the Washington Post, which is obviously left wing, couldn't actually argue about the actual, because it's very clear that temperatures have dropped.
Did you enjoy that video? I think you did. Come on now, hit that bell, subscribe, comment. Let's build this channel. I need more followers, I need more subscribers. Be part of the journey. See you soon.